Welcome to McDougall. On today's show, Robert Pritkin, director of the Pritkin Longevity Center, will propose that Americans are reacting with a vengeance against personal health. Hello, I'm Wayne Judd. And now, the man whose middle name is Second Opinion, Dr. John.
Good day, Wayne. Good to see you. Good to see you. Have you ever noticed how the people in your life stay the same size? I mean, the ones that are fat, were fat 5 years ago, 10 years ago, are still fat today.
Well, they stay the same size or they get bigger.
Yeah, I suppose some of them do get
like
bigger
that.
as they get older.
Right.
But, you know, generally they keep the same shape. And there was an article in the newspaper which followed a scientific presentation in one of the medical journals that said there's a reason for that.
Right.
Now, they talked about a set point, how people have this set point that they always return to. And if they make an effort to lose weight, then a few months later, or a few weeks or days later, they return to that set point.
Oh, yes.
Or say they go on a cruise and they gain a lot of weight, you know, 10, 15 pounds. Pretty soon they return to that set point, so they're always the same.
I know about that article. In fact, my wife has been mourning ever since she read it, and that's how I know about it.
Well,
I didn't read it.
It does give a fatalistic outlook on things for dieters.
Which is justified, I assume.
It is to some extent, and also, you know, when people say that once you're fat, you're always fat, you know, it gives them ammunition for believing that. But that's if you continue to eat the rich American diet. You always return to that set point. There is a way to beat that.
There is.
In fact, there are two ways to beat it. One I like a lot because it's easy. And the other one, other people may like a lot. They may find it easy and enjoyable. The one way that really works well, and a lot of people have discovered, you probably have friends and relatives who've gotten into this, is to exercise.
Right.
But the kind of exercise you have to do, I mean, it is a lot of exercise. You have to become a long-distance runner or dedicate an hour or two to exercise a day. And quite honestly, personally, that doesn't appeal to me.
I don't have time for that. There's no way I could.
But there are a lot of people out there who do, and we should pat them on the back and compliment them for getting that kind of exercise because it's so good to them. But I want to tell you the really easy way.
Okay.
The easy way to change that set point so that you don't always look the same or, like you say, gain weight is to change the composition of your diet. And what I mean by that is the diet is composed of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And the way you change that set point, and the only way you can change it permanently and, in my opinion, effortlessly, is to change that composition. Now, Americans will eat 40 to 50% of their calories as fat. 30–40% of their calories as carbohydrate.
Okay, some examples of what that means.
Well, they eat meat, they eat dairy, they eat vegetable oils, they eat, you know, some bread, some potatoes.
Wait a minute, vegetable oils are bad?
Well, it's 100% fat. Vegetable oil is 100% fat. So here you end up with...
If you can't trust a vegetable, who can you trust, John?
Well, you want to be careful of those oils. Those are not vegetables themselves. They're processed.
All right.
Okay, so you've got a diet that's, say, you know, 40–50% fat. The way you change this so that you permanently and effortlessly can change your body size, and I mean permanently, is you change the composition so you bring the fat way down, and I like maybe 7, 8, 9, 10% fat, and the carbohydrate way up to, say, 70, 75, 80% carbohydrate.
So you have, and you do that forever?
Yes, and you end up eating the most delicious foods there are.
Oh, I think I was going to say you end up eating food you don't like very much.
You end up
have to be miserable all your life.
These are the comfort foods, Wayne. The comfort foods. People really like these things if they stop and think about it. They like oatmeal for breakfast. They like waffles and pancakes made of the right ingredients. Hashed brown potatoes, cooked, of course, without that vegetable grease.
But then they're pretty dry, aren't they?
No, you put a little ketchup on top. You
Choke
put a little
them down,
barbecue sauce.
Okay.
No, they're delicious.
All right.
And you also can have things for lunch like vegetable soups, and for dinner like bean burritos, spaghetti marinara sauce. This is a diet based on starches with vegetables and fruits. And this kind of diet, when you look around the world where people eat high-starch diets, like in Asia where they eat lots of rice, or you look in Africa where they eat millet, bean, corn, or in South America, in the native parts of South America where they eat corn and beans and other grains and vegetables. They're always thin people.
Except that they die sooner than we do.
Well,
so
they die of
what's the
infectious
advantage?
diseases. They don't die of heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer that we die of in this country. They die of infectious diseases, problems that we have overcome. But these people are always trimmed from Asia and from Africa and from other places, parts of the world where they eat starch-based diets. But they lose that immunity to obesity when they move to a rich country like the United States. And then they change the composition of their diet. They go from 80% carbohydrate down to, say, 40% carbohydrate. They go from 10% fat to, say, up to, you know, 40–50% fat. And they get fat and they get the diseases that are common in our society. So that's how you control your set point, is you become well informed about food, you learn about the importance of the composition of the diet, and then you choose the right composition of your meal plan. It's the most delicious foods that anybody could possibly design, and you put together a tasty meal plan with the right spices, and you end up effortlessly, and that's the real secret, effortlessly eating a diet that lowers your weight set point so that you always be trim, and it's no coincidence that same diet allows you to be healthy.
So you're saying that the Americans shouldn't eat the American diet?
The American diet is a diet of kings and queens. We end up looking fat like kings and queens. It's a sad situation, but it can be changed. And we're going to get more information on how to change that rich American diet. We're going to get it from one of the experts in this country, a great friend of mine, Robert Pritkin, who's going to tell us about some diet myths and also the backlash of the American public to dieting. We'll be back in just a moment.
We learned English.
Your kids can too. Just watch Hello Channel.
And welcome back. Joining us is Robert Pritkin, director of the Pritkin. Do you still call it the Longevity Center?
Yes, we do.
Well, that's a good name for it. I've known Robert Pritkin for years, a man I have great respect for. And we've been talking about, in fact, let me put it to you this way, Robert. I think that your family and other people who have worked with high carbohydrate diets have come up with the correct diet for the human being. And I thought that was all settled. You know, they just accept the fact that people are supposed to live on lots of starches and vegetables and fruits and cut down the meat and dairy products. But there's a backlash. There's a backlash in the scientific community. There's a backlash among the public at dieting. They're getting frustrated. And what do you see happening? You've been in this for so long.
Well, I personally think it's a very good thing, because the way that people have tried to diet and lose weight in this country has been scientifically bankrupt. It hasn't worked. We've tried to diet by portion control, you know, the old French idea.
Starve yourself.
Yeah, you go to a restaurant in France, you get a steak, it's a 6-ounce steak. You come to America, you get an 18-ounce porterhouse. So the idea is portion control, just be a little bit more moderate. Well, no one ever tested whether portion control would work until Consumers Reports went in and investigated all of the portion control companies, and everybody regained all their weight in a year. And then International Journal of Obesity showed that the biggest predictor as to whether you're going to gain weight is whether currently you're trying to lose weight by portion control. So then a lot of people said, well, diet is deprivation. You've just got to exercise.
Dieting doesn't work.
Dieting doesn't work.
And there are scientific articles that tell us dieting doesn't work, so we might as well give up, just stay fat.
Well, then they said just focus on exercise. And then there was a study done last year that showed on a typical American diet, 60 minutes on a treadmill, you can still be in positive calorie balance. It means you're gaining weight doing 60 minutes a day on a treadmill. Right. No wonder Americans have gained 8 pounds in 10 years.
Yeah, that exercise part, that's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. And in fact, what do they call it now? The pleasure revenge. For the first time in 10 years, per capita consumption of meat, dairy,
yes. Why?
Lard, oil, sugar, all up.
Yeah, people are up too as far as the weight goes.
8 pounds in every age group. And Americans are fatter.
And why is that?
Well, the reason is that we have adapted over millions of years to deal with a problem that we don't really have much of in today's society, which was feast-famine. And the way that we have survived over years and years of inconsistent food supply is to seek out calorically dense foods, to gorge on them, and to have all kinds of mechanisms of dealing with famine, like slowing down your metabolic rate and things like that. And so what happens is that when you try to control weight by cutting back on calories or skipping meals, it feeds right into something our body knows how to handle real well.
So give us some specific examples. What have we actually done? What kind of food do we pick up that we shouldn't pick up?
Well, I'll give you an example of how things have worked. First of all, we figured, let's just eat less calories, and that's backfired. In fact, you were just talking about that New England Journal of Medicine study, which showed that as soon as people lose weight by portion control, their metabolic rate drops, and what is the symptom of that? Hunger. Cold, irritable, and hungry. That's a great person to want to hang around with. If they didn't get their weight back, we'd make them get their weight back.
Just to
change that person. Exactly.
And they always regain the weight. Diets always fail. I mean, you know, this is something every diet has learned. Dieters learned. You're always going to fail, so why bother?
Well, there is a way to solve it, obviously, and I think the best way to look at it is to look at the Pima Indians. Now, here's a group of people that we think are genetically have diabetes. What 40% of the Pima Indians in this country are diabetic and they're obese. Well, you go over to Mexico where they're on their traditional diet, Same genetics, and they're thin.
Right, no
thin
diabetes.
Pima, an obese Pima Indian. What is the magical difference going on? They're eating to satiety, they're eating the same, they're eating the foods that they've been on for years and years.
It's a fuel change.
It's a fuel change.
Yes.
We're eating a fuel that we were not designed to be
So
consuming.
is there any hope for the American public? Are they ever going to get it right? Are they ever going to understand that they're not trapped into obesity and sickness, that they do have control of their life?
Well, there's been a few missteps. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's call the fat-free movement. That's a perfect misstep. Okay, we're going to go fat-free because the fat we eat is the fat we're going to wear.
Fat-free cakes,
so
fat-free cookies,
fat-free
yes,
Snackwells and yogurts,
Absolutely.
and all of a sudden we're getting fatter than ever before. And all of a sudden we've realized that when you refine these carbohydrates, take them out of their natural starch shape, take all the fiber out, bring them to their closest calorie-dense point, your body has a hormonal response called an insulin reaction.
Yes.
Insulin spikes up. Insulin causes us to retain the fat. It increases the amount of food that we're going to convert into fat and store it. And we've even, I've noticed you pulled this article out called Syndrome X. We've developed an entire syndrome based off of these fat-free products, which are the best thing in the world for weight control.
So the fat-free products are actually giving people a false sense of hope.
They think it's calorie-free.
Are you saying we shouldn't continue? One of the things I've done since I've become more health conscious, I love reading packages in grocery stores. It's wonderful fun, reading packages. And all those zeros, I grab them all. Zeros, I look for the zeros. And is that bad? Is my body playing tricks on me here?
Well, first of all, fat-free doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make you have something that you're going to lose weight. For instance, a product like oatmeal, which isn't fat-free, it's 13 to 15% fat, is a fantastic product for losing weight because it doesn't cause a big insulin response. It has slow emptying out into the sugar, a nice slow level, keeps you have good satiety for a long period of time. To compare that to something like shredded wheat, which you would consider to be zero fat, that ought to be better than oatmeal.
Can you give us just a word on the insulin, this insulin reaction that a layperson could understand? Because I'm not clear I understand what you're saying.
What happens is that when sugar comes into the blood, your body will convert it, either put it into the muscles to burn or turn it into fat. And it does this through a hormone called insulin. Now normally when we would eat foods that contain sugar, like starches, it takes a long time for these sugars to break down, so a little bit of sugar goes in and the insulin trickles in. But now we've refined these products. We've got these in these little calorie bombs, these Snackwells, and we eat these things and boom, all this sugar hits us at once. The body responds with all of this insulin, and the insulin causes all the fat that's in our fat cells to stay there, so we can't burn the fat, so we effectively turn off our fat-burning machinery. And these elevated insulins also raise our appetite, which make us very hungry for what? Another calorie bomb.
Right.
And they're also associated with certain diseases.
Well, that's one of the big problems, is that in our society, particularly where we have some upper body fat, the average American is walking around with 25, 30% more insulin. Just like our cholesterols are high,
that's amazing.
Our insulin levels are high. And if you have a genetic propensity for diabetes, this elevated insulin will lead to diabetes as well. And in fact, we've published a paper a few years ago where we show that the average person that comes into our center drops their insulin 30%. All of a sudden your fat storage ends, so you start burning the fat, your appetite drops, and you can eat to satiety and lose weight.
Okay, but there is a backlash. There's a backlash in the scientific community against high carbohydrate diets. And when we get back, I want to talk about that backlash with you, Robert Pritkin. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hello.
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 Hello. Hello.
And welcome back. With me, the director of the Pritkin Longevity Center, Robert Pritkin, good friend, man filled with knowledge. I'm going to hit you with one. There's a backlash out there, Robert. You know, I believe that we've got the right diet figured out. It's the diet your family's been teaching for several decades, a diet I believe in. It's a diet of carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables primarily. But the backlash is coming to us and saying that that kind of diet's harmful. In fact, a newspaper article is handed to me by one of the audience participants says that a high carbohydrate diet can raise blood sugar, can drop your good cholesterol, it can raise your triglycerides. It sounds like something pretty terrible.
It's absolutely true that there are certain kind of carbohydrates that can do that. But just like all fats aren't created equal, All carbohydrates aren't either. And when you have our body's designed to have carbohydrates in their natural, unrefined, and that's the key word, unrefined state, filled with all the natural fibers.
Like whole grain rice and potatoes.
Potatoes, tubers, and those sorts of things. But when you refine the carbohydrate, and they hit your blood fast because there's nothing to slow it down, they will have a large insulin response. They can produce triglycerides. They can raise your blood sugar.
It even says it raises your blood pressure.
Well, that's one of the consequences of this syndrome.
In your center, you've studied thousands of people. I mean, you don't see that. You see the opposite, don't you?
We just published a paper last month in Diabetes Care, a study of 667 type 2 diabetics, the exact diabetic we're talking about. They all had what they call Syndrome X. Let me tell you what Syndrome X is. You can have a normal cholesterol level, but if you have Syndrome X, you can have the risk of a heart attack of somebody with a 250 cholesterol level and a cigarette in their mouth. And what is Syndrome X? It's elevated triglycerides or blood fats, elevated insulin, depressed HDL or good cholesterol, and high blood pressure, and it's almost always associated with some upper body fat.
Right. I see that a lot. I mean, that's a typical patient that I see.
That's a typical type 2 diabetic or a person with insulin resistance. The wonderful thing is, though, you can cure this in about 2 weeks.
You can get it. Syndrome X is out the door, right?
You can completely neutralize it. In fact, we showed in our study that we published last month that the majority of these individuals, not only can we reduce all these risk factors to a normal level, we get them off insulin, we can get them off oral agents, and we did a 5-year follow-up study on that showing the same sorts of things too. The problem is, and the reason why these researchers are finding this problem, is they do something that's what we call a laboratory abstraction. Let me tell you what they do. They take people on a low-fat diet, and they take people on a high-fat diet, but they make them eat the same amount of calories. That means on a high-fat diet, where it takes many more calories to feel full, you're hungry all the time. And on the low-fat diet, where it takes many less calories to feel full, you're stuffed.
But the way they want us to solve this problem, the people who promote this theory that high carbohydrate diets can be bad for some people, is they want us to eat more oil, more olive oil, more other vegetable oils.
That's a great idea. Ask the Pima Indians how well that worked. Now, these are individuals that have Syndrome X. And in Mexico, where they're on their natural high-carb, low-fat diet, they're thin and they don't have Syndrome X, they move to America. We put them on all these food support programs, took them away from their native diet, gave them exactly the kind of diet these diabetic researchers want to give them, and they have the most diabetes of any group in the world. What a solution.
Fat, including vegetable oil, deregulates diabetes, doesn't it? It makes the blood sugar go up higher. Even fish fat. They've been doing many studies that show fish fat makes.
The problem is, that's true with the fish fat, but the problem is that when you're on a high-fat diet, you tend to eat more calories. And when you tend to eat more calories, you tend to gain weight. And when you tend to gain weight, if you have a propensity for diabetes, it is exacerbated and your insulin goes up, which makes you even hungrier. All of these problems start that way. How are you possibly going to deal with these diseases of obesity by going to a high-fat diet?
Let's get our phone call now. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, you had a question for Robert Pritkin.
Yes. I read recently that it's dangerous to let your cholesterol get too low, like below 160, because there's an increased risk of diseases like cancer. Any comments?
Yes, that was the study that came out of Israel 2 weeks ago, and it's really the son of another study that came out, which was the son of another study.
That have said that.
Let me tell you how that all originated. First of all, it's much like the Metropolitan Life tables that used to say if you were too thin, you had a greater risk of dying and you should be a little bit overweight. And then all of a sudden someone said, let's take the smokers out of the group. As soon as the smokers got out of the group, the thinner the better.
Right.
We have the same sort of problem with this cholesterol level and death rate. Certain diseases lower cholesterol, colon cancer.
Right.
If your cholesterol starts dropping and your weight drops and you haven't had a change in diet, I would call up a physician. You've got some serious problems to be concerned with. Colon cancer lowers cholesterol. If you take those people out that have wasting diseases, all of a sudden,
take the sick people out, and then
the lower the cholesterol, the better. In fact, if you look at international studies, the lower the cholesterol, the less colon cancer, the less prostate cancer, the less breast cancer, and the less heart disease.
Thank you, caller. You think there's any hope? Will the public really understand it, and will the backlash stop?
Well, I'm hopeful that they will, much like they gave up on the dieting, on this portion control. And maybe they're going to find it through Oprah and not through us, I'm not sure.
Oprah certainly has made a big impression. She showed you how not to do it. And
how to do it.
She's still exercising a couple hours a day. If she'd get that fat even further down in her diet.
Well, the problem with exercising that much is if you get an injury, and you haven't really, if you've been controlling your weight through exercise and you get an injury, and when we, you know, as they say, the older the model, the more time in the shop.
They say that, huh?
Of course, for most of us who are lay people, It takes a good bit of faith to eat right, doesn't it? Because we don't understand all of these studies. There's a lot that we don't understand
so quickly.
Well, first of all, you don't have to have delayed gratification. When you go on this type of approach that we're talking to, your cholesterol drops in 2 weeks, blood pressure, blood sugar. But the most important thing, and this is where the whole set point argument comes in, you start to lose weight without hunger. This is crucial. Now, it's not going to be a rapid weight loss.
And people like to see the results. And that's one of the things that your program has given people, is a chance to do something that's tangible, that works, and they see the results. Robert Pritkin, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank you for all the contribution you've made. And it's really great to have a program that works.
Well, we've been showing it for a long time, and so have you.
And we'll be back in just a moment with Robert Pritkin.
Thanks for watching Hello Channel. Learn the language of the internet, travel, commerce, and diplomacy. Watch Hello Channel and learn English. Do it for yourself.
We're back with Robert Pritkin talking about the American diet and how to solve its problems.
Well, the first thing we need to do is to recalibrate our attitude. For instance, when people come to me and say, you know, Robert, I've lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I say, I'm really sorry to hear that, because the only way you could have possibly done that was by going hungry and reducing your set point, which means that you're going to regain the weight. What I'd much rather hear is say, Robert, I've changed my lifestyle. I'm eating frequently, I'm eating the right kinds of foods, and I'm taking a walk every day. And guess what? I lost 1.5 pounds this week. And I say, you know what? Did you do it without hunger? Absolutely. You've readjusted your set point. Those are the ingredients to long-term success.
That's great. Because hunger is unnatural. It's painful, isn't it?
Well, who can stand it? I mean, you're going to try to put discipline against Mother Nature?
The miserable American.
I'll put my money on Mother Nature every time.
So the message is the hunger drive is designed correctly, and we just have to figure out the right kind of foods to eat.
You know, our ancestors have been doing it real well for quite a long time. Maybe we ought to go back and take a look at what they've been doing.
Sounds like a good idea. Robert Pritkin, thank you very much. And we'll be back next time.